AM 790 Talk and Business presents The Coalition, a weekly 1-hour show that looks at all sides of local, regional, and national news, as well as current events. Join us now for The Coalition.
And we are live, AM 790, your station for news, business, and New York Yankees. The Coalition _radio on the Mighty Mighty Twitter, Facebook.com, The Coalition Radio. This is our Thanksgiving weekend jubilee. We're going to give thanks for a lot of things, including community activism this week. Joining me again this week, co-host Dave Fisher. Dave, welcome back to the Coalition.
Pat, thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure.
Dave is going to be with us a lot over the next few months, over the next few years, on into eternity, as we seem to we'll broadcast this live from outer space at some point.
I hope this isn't the first broadcast that sentient life from another galaxy finds.
Imagine if another universe was judging us by Rhode Island. Dave, you've had a busy week, and first of all, coalitionradio.us is our blog website where you can find the most recent podcasts, some of our what we call our greatest hits going back to when we were on internet-only radio, all the way forward to our appearances here on AM 790, as well as individual blogs by a variety of contributors. One of the hallmarks of the Coalition is, in fact, the notion that we span all gamuts of independent media and independent political thought. You can find folks from the Green Party blogging there. You can find folks from the Progressive Democrats, Tea Party folks, liberty-minded folks. The notion, of course, underlying the Coalition is not only are we outrage porn-free, where we don't troll to common egos and sentiment by preying on issues for emotional responses. Not only do we not handicap elections, we want to know when people come on. We don't want to know about their campaign financing. We don't want to know about, what they're polling at. We want to know not if they're going to win, why they should win. But we also, it is our core belief here on the Coalition that independent political groups share much more in common than anyone ever would believe. Green parties, progressives, liberty folks, even the occasional Tea Party person. We all have the same common goals. We may be following different journeys to get there. We believe, though, to our very core that if we started down and broke it down to a few issues, that we could affect real change here in the United States and in Rhode Island, and this show is going to be indicative of that. Dave, talk about some of the blogs that you wrote this week. You were very, very busy. We were chatting online through the miracle of Facebook at, 2 in the morning at one point?
Well, I could not take my eyes off Ferguson. You had tweeted me a link to a live stream that was just, some guy boots on the ground with his iPhone just streaming out video, uncut. And I thought that... that was kind of a boon for the blog this week, was just putting up those live streams on Monday night into Tuesday, and without any editorializing, just put it out there. This is what's going on the ground in Ferguson. See what's going on. Decide for yourself. So that was a huge thing, and that's really kind of dominated the conversation this whole week. So what I'm trying to do with my blog at the Coalition, where you can now find my blogging exclusively at the Coalition. So if you're reading one of those other tabloid or
yellow
left-wing
journalism
blogs and you're looking for my stuff over there, my reasoning behind wanting to come over to the Coalition was what you just said in the show's intro. We have a lot more in common than we have differences, and I think we need to focus on that a little bit more. But another thing I see missing from the local media and blogosphere, and the national media and blogosphere generally, is I think a lot of times the arguments and the issues of the day get so framed by the hard right and the hard left that a lot of what we should be talking about goes missing. So that's what I'm going to try to bring to the blog. One of the things this week, everybody's up in arms about immigration reform, and there seems to be, again, this on one side it's like full amnesty, and on the other side it's like, no, we need to deport these people back to where they came from. But nobody really has mentioned the massive economic impacts that would have on the economy of the United States. So there was a study that was released last year from the Institute for Tax and Economic Policy. that basically concluded in fiscal 2010. Undocumented immigrants contributed about $11 billion nationwide to state and local governments via sales tax, renter's tax, property tax, sewer use fees, water use fees. So this is a pretty significant amount of money that's actually coming back into the system. And, there's that secondary group of what I like to call the falsely documented immigrants that may have an expired green card or an expired work visa or even a fake Social Security. Most of these folks are actually collecting a paycheck, a computerized, paychecks with an X paycheck from their employer that's getting the federal and the state and the FICA and the temporary disability insurance taken out of it that, frankly, as undocumented people or falsely documented people, they'll never be able to take advantage of that system that they're paying into. So, and I think that there's probably a significant amount of money coming into the coffers from those folks as well. Again, I think that the answer lies somewhere between massive deportations and 100% amnesty across the board, but that seems to get lost in the conversation.
Why can't we affect an immigration system similar to the turn of the 20th century, where you had fairly open borders, but you just had some modicum of control? People who were overtly criminal, people who were reasonably healthy, were screened, and the notion being that you had some type of connection to the country already. Why is it? I call me a simple man. I'm not a smart man. What prevents us from going back to that model?
Well, I think in a lot of cases the focus or the goal of people immigrating to the United States has changed in a lot of ways. Where the conventional wisdom says, oh, this person is going to come here and work hard for a few years and then bring their family here to the United States. And I think that's shifted over the past 30 years, where there's quite a few people coming to the United States, working for a few years, and then just taking that money and going back home if they're not sending it directly back home out of the economy while they're working. So I think that that's another thing that kind of gets lost in this immigration debate is the changing face of immigration. How long are people staying here? Are they bringing their families with them? Or are they kind of using the United States as a stepping stone to better their lives back in their own countries?
I actually don't have an issue with that as well. What seems to be missing is I'll call it the screening component. We recently here in the United States have gone through a public health crisis, somewhat emotionally out of Ebola, somewhat more seriously out of tuberculosis and some of the other oses that were brought over here to the country, clearly because of tuberculosis. There's a tuberculosis center here in Providence now. As a child, because I'm one of the oldest guys in this room right now, I can tell you that I was raised to believe that tuberculosis had been pretty much eradicated in this country.
Yeah.
All right. And it's clear to me that it stems directly as a result of step aside for a second, listening to another talk show, and then talking about some of the public health crises that I just mentioned. And the host actually went on to posit that the decision by a number of people not to immunize their children was a core component of this reemergence of these diseases. I was astonished by that because I believe that percentage to be actually fairly small, when in fact when you've got millions of people entering the country in an uncontrolled manner, it's not the fact that they're here that I find frustrating, it's the fact that we have no control over how they got here and what they're quote-unquote bringing with them. Why not go back to an Ellis Island formula? What was wrong about that?
Well, we still largely operate by the Ellis Island formula if you're coming into this country legally. Certainly, New York is not the only inroad into the country at this point. We have thousands of legal immigrants coming through Los Angeles, coming through the Texas-Mexico border, coming through the Canadian-American border. Mm-hmm.
And they're certainly not all Hispanic either.
No, and actually, this is another thing that gets lost in the conversation. There's actually, you talk about people taking jobs, there's actually a pretty big crisis in the northern border states of the United States with Canada, where there are people coming over the border for day jobs from Canada, but you never really hear this side of the of the immigration argument, the undocumented workers argument. And I don't know if it's because Canadians are really polite or because they're not brown, but
right. You just gave me this mental image of a Home Depot. Sorry.
Right, need some day labor, eh?
Hey. But, it's clear legal immigration is the lifeblood of this country. It has brought over innovation, a work ethic, a reinvigoration of the economy on 1,000 different levels since this country was formed. But, again, it just... There's no controls. We don't know who's coming over. We don't know the reasons they're coming over. We don't know what their health status is when they're here, and we're introducing them right into our schools. Our schools are a petri dish for this madness. And yet, this is a country where, and I think everyone sitting at this desk has had that, $502 1099 that got tracked down by this country. A year later, you screw with
or a few years later.
Yeah, you screw with the federales on that 1099, and somehow they can find you. And yet, we can't control these other things.
Right.
The other thing that's frustrating to me about this recent edict from the Obaministas is that there's no clear signal that all of a sudden, now that we've declared some level of potential amnesty for 5 million, 10 million, 100 million people, whatever, that starting tomorrow they're going to actually start enforcing the laws again. The manner in which they did this, to me, is so blatantly illegal, and really by affecting change through an order at the level of the president, destroys or begins to further destroy the notion of our three chambers of government.
Aside from what you think of the judicial impacts of that executive order, is it constitutional? Is it unconstitutional? Again, I think that just the nuts and bolts of the plan don't really address the new face of immigration in this country, which is people who are coming here and usually staying for 5 years or less. Mm-hmm. And this plan is saying basically you have to have been here for 5 years or longer. And I think that the growing segment of immigrant population in the United States isn't going to fit within those parameters. So, it may be amnesty on paper, but when you look at the technical, the implementation of that law, I don't think it's going to have as great as an effect on a lot of folks in this country that they think it will have.
So, wait a minute, are you alleging that potentially the Obaministas are throwing a sop to their political base that has no real meaning? Has that ever happened before?
Oh, God, no. I mean, not in recent history. I mean, it's the party of red meat. I was I went to this rally with the First Lady that Gina Raimondo had. A friend of mine had an extra ticket.
I wasn't invited.
Interesting.
Anybody else in the room invited? No.
And I stood there and and I'm watching. It's Jack Reed and Jim Langevin and David Cicilline and Senator Whitehouse, all these guys getting up, and I'm watching David Cicilline up on stage, and I'm like, I get it. I get how he wins, because he was just he had a bucket full of red meat and he was just tossing it out there. I mean, in and out of Spanish at the Sanchez school. I mean, he was just feeding the base what they wanted, and really, whether or not you like him on a policy level for the retail politicking angle, I don't think there's anybody better in this state than David Cicilline.
Well, this entire state is driven by outrage porn at this point.
Yeah,
the most important decisions are being made as a result of whatever emotional issues are thrown out to the base, and they raise a stink, and it has little or nothing to do with factual.
Oh, look at look at the uproar over this roadmap, Rhode Island. I mean, this is a non-binding, basically planning suggestion for the state, and people are absolutely up in arms about it.
Well, we are going to have a show about that. I want to get you on. I want you to debate one of our Tea Party friends to actually go over the nitty-gritties of that, because at this point that entire issue has been so clouded with rhetoric and heat, and on both sides. I mean, on one side, I salute the Tea Party folks for going through it on a factual basis. At the same time, they're being called racist, because they're always called racist, even though they are not overtly engaging in any racial behavior that I can see.
Well, when your argument against the roadmap is some really nutty Agenda 21 conspiracy video, it doesn't really give the general public a lot of credence as to what you're doing.
The tricky part, though, is just kind of play counterpoint with you, is that there has been such an overt shift in control over the economy by the Cloward Piven types, that a lot of these folks